vacation, Bert?
Well, my vacation was fine. As we are starting to go live, it's going to take it a second on Facebook. Yeah, it went really well. It wasn't much of a vacation. It was just 3 days in the middle of the week. I went down and I hunted for things to photograph in nature. You know, I shot some birds. I shot some snakes and turtles and alligators.
Oh, okay.
And
Snakes, okay.
yeah,
My favorite.
I got a video of a venomous snake.
No.
Yeah, it was a cottonmouth.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm not too fond of snakes.
I didn't used to be either. I was irrationally afraid of them, and I decided I didn't want to be anymore. So I'm trying to overcome that fear
Okay.
by becoming what they call a herper.
Herper?
Yeah, it's short for herpetologist. Herpers are
Okay.
people who go out and look for lizards and frogs and
And frogs
turtles and snakes and things like that.
Well, I don't mind frogs and lizards. I
I
don't want
just don't like
snakes.
I can do frogs and lizards. Those are fine. Matter of fact, when I was younger, we had a lizard that was about, oh, so big. And that didn't bother me one bit, but I saw a snake when I was younger, and then it just stuck in my mind to this day. I'm better than what I was back when, but
Well, you've got to, Sheila, show her the video of Patricia holding a snake for the first time. She screamed through the whole thing. And so I put horror movie music in the background while she's screaming. And I played the music from the Psycho, you know, the shower scene where all the violins go.
yeah, I know that. Yeah, I remember that one. Yes.
She's just screaming. She's holding the snake out here like this, just screaming. You got to see it. It's worth seeing. You have to go. I guess you can find it on the Bert Gary page on Facebook.
Yeah, I'm getting there, I think.
Oh Lord, if you play it now.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah, play it afterward, please.
Is that
Yes.
this one right here?
Hold it a little bit. Hold it up a little bit. No, that's my moccasin. This would be
Okay.
before that.
Well, you know, all snakes look the same to me.
Yeah,
Okay.
you'll see it. You'll see it. Well, welcome everybody. We're talking about the languages that Jesus spoke, and a little bit more than that, actually. And I wanted to ask the panel as we were beginning today, and Patricia's running late. She'll be here shortly. I wanted to ask, do you think Jesus? How many of you think Jesus was literate, meaning that he could read and write?
I believe he is, or was, right. I'm sure. There had to be something there.
Yes, sir, Gino. Oh, you're just raising your hand to say, I believe he was literate.
I believe.
Yeah. So do you know why you believe? Do any of you know why you believe that? And why have we lost some of our people? Or is that just because it's not showing up on Facebook? Oh, it's just Facebook. Facebook can only hold like 4 pictures at a time, and we've got like 6 or 7 people here. So anyway, yeah. So why do you think he was literate?
Why do I think he was literate? I don't know. When he set Moses up for the 10 Commandments and all that, he had to know something about reading and writing to be able to send him down with the tablets and have him, you know, because if he couldn't read and write.
And he's a little nippy. Oh God.
Hey, you got to turn the snake video off.
I know you got to turn the snake video off.
Oh my God.
Okay, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
She's trying to steer me right off
That
this
was
stool.
so
let me
much
tell you.
fun. Yeah, y'all, if y'all will go to Bert Gary on Facebook, yeah, on my most recent little visit and on previous occasions, Patricia and I have gone looking for, you know, turtles and frogs and snakes and such as that. And you can see,
That's not too
some pretty
bad.
funny reactions on Patricia's part because she's still terrified of them, and she held one, and boy, that video is gold. It is gold. Okay, so any other reasons why you think that Jesus was literate?
Because didn't he knew the law?
Yeah, so how did he learn the law? He
had to read
raised
and
in
write it.
Nazareth, and there was a synagogue there, so maybe they taught him you know, about the scriptures
Brought the scriptures in.
growing
Right.
up, right? As an adult, didn't he go back to the Nazareth synagogue? And Gino, tell him what happened there. You're muted, dude.
He was handed the scroll by the prophet Isaiah and read it out loud.
Yeah, he did.
Oh, he did.
Yeah, he read it out loud in the synagogue.
Spirit of the
He pulled
Lord
it
is
back up
upon
and
me.
handed it to the attendant. Yeah, he read, it says he specifically read from it. Yeah, I mean, that's the example that probably comes to my mind first, that defines Jesus as someone who could read. Now, what language was that scroll written in?
Hebrew?
It was. All of their scrolls were, with an exception that I'll show you in just a moment, were written in Hebrew. So the question for me tonight is, you know, I think we're pretty sure he was literate, and we're pretty sure that he could read Hebrew. But what language or languages did he speak, and how do we know? So you want to look at my little PowerPoint?
Sure.
Let's go for it. I hope you're able to see it now.
There we go.
Can you see it?
Yes, we
Yes.
can.
Okay, so the four languages that we're concerned about here, which were being used at the time of Jesus in Israel, in occupied Israel, occupied by the Romans, remember, in the first century. They were the ones who crucified him. So the four languages involved here are Aramaic, Hebrew, Greek, and Latin. Are you ready for a summary?
Sure.
Let's go. Every time I admit someone, I have to reset this thing. Okay, it is reset. Okay, so Aramaic and Hebrew are sister languages in the Semitic family of languages. And at the time of King David, around 1000 BC, most of the kingdoms around Israel, specifically those to the north and to the east, spoke Aramaic. It was a common language. And Israel at the time of David spoke and wrote an archaic form of Hebrew. Not all scholars would agree with that, because we've got some weird scholars out there, but that's the majority opinion. There were two great superpowers that conquered Israel and Judah. Remember, the kingdoms divided after David and Solomon. After Saul, David, and Solomon, the kingdoms divided, and you had a northern kingdom and a southern kingdom. One was called Israel and one was called Judah. And they had their own kings. And they disputed about where you're supposed to worship. They were taken, the Israelite and Judahite peoples were taken into exile. Assyria first took them, and they dominated the region from 911 to 605 BC. And then Babylon took them not too long after that, in the 700s. Babylon conquered the area, and they ruled from 605 to 539 BC. Remember that date, 539 BC, because that's a date of liberation. That's the 4th of July for Israel right there. They got to go home because of Cyrus of Persia conquering the Babylonians. The lingua franca of both of these empires. By lingua franca, I mean the common language, the language of commerce. Sort of like English is the lingua franca of the world today. That's why it's the most learned language in schools all around the world, is because it's sort of the universal language that everybody learns second, so that they can compete in the economic market. It's the language of the marketplace and commerce. English is today. Well, so was Aramaic at the time. So Israel was dominated by them and was held in captivity by both of them. And the language that they used was Assyrian. So as you can imagine, I mean, it was Aramaic. So you can imagine that upon their return home, guess what? Hebrew people were speaking the language of their captors, Aramaic. Now, as you can see in the next slide, Hebrew was still in use, especially in Judah and in near Jerusalem. And it was, of course, still taught and read wherever Israelites lived because their sacred writings were in Hebrew. But after 539 BC, when they got to go home, Aramaic was also in heavy use because they learned it from the people who held them captive for so many years, generations. Now, there's proof of this in the Old Testament. A collection of writings in Hebrew, yeah, the Old Testament is predominantly a collection of writings in Hebrew, yet it's a little known fact, 268 verses of the Old Testament are written in Aramaic. And there they are. Ezra, 200 verses, Daniel, 67 verses, Jeremiah, 1 verse. And in addition to that, there are Aramaic words and phrases found throughout the latter part of the Old Testament, the later writings. Which would be identified with the later date, 539, after 539 BC. So the presence of Aramaic in the Old Testament proves that Aramaic was in use in post-exile Israel and Judah. When these verses were written, people could read it and people were writing in it, and they were writing Bible in Aramaic, okay? Bet you didn't know that.
No?
Okay, so from 539 BC to the time of Jesus, Aramaic was increasingly used as everyday language, just like the surrounding kingdoms. Israel and Judah together were linguistically appropriated to the regional lingua franca. It's like cultural appropriation, you know? When you are culturally appropriated, when you move somewhere else or when someone conquers you, you start to take on their language and their customs and their dress and their style and their architecture. And this was happening to Israel. By the time of Jesus, there were regional Aramaic dialects, and that included Galilean, Samaritan, and Judean dialects. And Hebrew remained primarily the language of religious studies and worship. About 300 AD, Hebrew died. It became a dead language. And by that, I mean, no groups of people, no cultures, no Jewish type folks anywhere were using it for their everyday speech. It was only the language of scripture and liturgy and worship. But Ben Yehuda, a very important Jewish leader in the late 19th century, began trying to revive the language as a spoken language. But there was a problem. In Hebrew, there aren't any vowels. So which vowel sound do you use for every word? So he began to develop a methodology whereby he was making solid guesses about how ancient Hebrew might have been pronounced. So today, millions of people speak Hebrew. It's the official spoken language of the state of Israel since 1948. Really before that, 1921, it was the co-official language along with English and Aramaic, I think, English and Aramaic. But would Jesus and his disciples have understood what Benjamin Netanyahu is saying when he speaks in modern Hebrew? I think it would be like me trying to understand Old English. It would be, the pronunciations might be really different and weird. You know, like worse than an accent, words are actually pronounced with different vowel sounds. So that's just a guess. All right, continuing. Okay, we've done all that with Hebrew and Aramaic, and now suddenly we've got the New Testament written in an entirely different language. It's called Koine Greek. Now, how in the world did our New Testament end up being written in Greek? Why not Hebrew? Most of the first followers of Jesus were of the Hebrew faith, but they spoke Aramaic. Well, why not in Aramaic? Well, there was a new player in the game that came in 330 BC, and his name was Alexander the Great, and he conquered that region. And the Seleucids, and I forget the other group that followed him. There were several Greek dynasties that followed, and they Hellenized, meaning making Greek by style and culture and religion and language. They Hellenized the entire region, especially Galilee, so that everywhere you looked, it was becoming more and more Greek in Israel, in Samaria, and in Judea. Now, Rome conquered Greece in the 1st century BC, and this is where we're getting close to Jesus, and they claimed the Eastern Mediterranean, and that includes Israel. And while Rome used Latin for governmental matters, it embraced Greek as the continued and growing lingua franca for the empire. So by the time of Jesus, Greek cities thrived throughout Galilee, Samaria, and Judea, just 4 miles from Jesus's growing up town in Nazareth was the capital of Galilee called Sepphoris, and they spoke Greek all day long, every day there. So if you ever went shopping or got a job in a city nearby, you had to know Greek. If you wanted to read the store signs, if you wanted to read official notifications, you had to know Greek. In fact, Jesus uses some Greek words in his teaching, like hypocrites. That's a Greek word. It's not in Aramaic or Hebrew. It means hypocrite. So by the time of Jesus, you've got the commerce in the region driven by the Greek language, and it's the language of the marketplace. You want to shop? You want a job? It's dominated by Greek culture, especially in Galilee. Now, archaeology has revealed that 40% of the inscriptions and signs made by Israelis in Jesus's day were in Greek. 40%. Indicating that the population could read it, and they expected them to. Between 300 BC and 500 AD, 70% of the Jewish funerary, is that the word? Funerary inscriptions were in Greek. 70% of the inscriptions on people's graves were in Greek. In Israel, from 300 BC to 500 AD, people adopted Roman styles, Roman architecture, and Rome's Greek language, Koine Greek. And the New Testament writers all wrote in Greek because that was the most widely used language in that region of the world at the time because of the Roman Empire. It was the language everyone used for commerce, everyday street language and commerce. So what does that tell you? Does that mean that Jesus was not speaking Aramaic? No, it means he was speaking Aramaic every day. He probably taught in Aramaic most of the time. He would quote things in Hebrew from scripture, though, I bet, and I can show you where he did. And there are times when he used Greek words, and he had a disciple with a Greek name, and he had Greeks who came to speak to him. And by the way, what language was he speaking when he spoke to Pilate? You think Pilate knew Aramaic? I don't think so. So let's keep going with this. Did Jesus and his disciples ever write anything? Well, Jesus is only said to have written one thing, and we don't know what it was. In John 8, some of the leaders of the Hebrew religion there in Jerusalem said, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the very act of committing adultery. Now in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now, what do you say?" And they said this to test him so that they might have some charge to bring against him. Jesus bent down and wrote. The Greek word is grapho. It means to write words. It doesn't mean doodle. It doesn't mean draw. He wrote words. And John did not tell us what those words are, but I think they might have rattled the people who were ready to throw stones, whatever it was that he wrote. It remains a mystery, but he wrote something. So we don't know what language he wrote it in, but whatever he wrote, I think they got the point.
Hey,
Matthew,
Bert.
Yeah.
I have a theory on what he wrote.
I know you do. I'd love to hear it.
I think he wrote, if you caught her in the act of adultery, why is she alone?
Yeah, where's the guy? It says you're
Yeah,
supposed to
where's
tell
the
both
guy? Or was it one of you?
of them. Yeah.
Who's the witness? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. That very well could be, or he might have written the name of the one that was with her.
Uh-huh. Uh-oh.
And what if he was standing right there holding a rock?
Bro.
Oops. Oops. Okay. So Matthew, Levi, the tax collector, there's no doubt he could write. I mean, they wouldn't have hired him if he couldn't. He's got to keep ledgers on everybody. He's got to write their names. He's got to write how much they give. He's got to write down the date. Okay. We know at least amongst the 12 that Matthew, the tax collector, could write. What about the four gospels? It's said that they were written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. However, the ancient Greek manuscripts assign no authorship. They were written anonymously. The church, some centuries later, assigned apostles' names to these documents to honor them and to also designate them, so we know which gospel we're talking about. So, for example, did Matthew, the tax collector, actually write Matthew's gospel? We don't know that for sure. Tradition puts Matthew's name on it, but we don't know that for sure. Could be. I personally think it's doubtful. I think all of these four gospels were written in the 70s, 80s, and 90s AD. And this would have been enough time to have passed, some 50 years, that some of these people have already died. So probably not. What about 1st and 2nd Peter? Were they written by the Apostle Peter? Tradition says yes, and there is some evidence that it's possible. The writer of these two letters that are claimed to have been written by Peter could have been written, what do they call it, Gino, when you write something in someone else's name? Pseudepigraphal?
Yeah.
Is it pseudepigraphal?
Yep.
Yeah, it's like
A ghostwriter.
yeah, it's like a ghostwriter, and they don't mean to be plagiarizing. In the ancient world, you would write in someone else's name to honor them, and everybody would know you weren't really them, but you were writing them to recall their authority and show respect. Well, today it's called plagiarism, and you can get sued. Debbie's back. I need to admit her. So I just admitted you, Debbie. And if Peter the fisherman wrote that, then Peter was taught Greek. Now, Peter was from Bethsaida, and Bethsaida was on the Greek side of the Jordan River and the Sea of Galilee. He was in a city that had a pagan temple in it. He was exposed to much more Greek culture than they were over in Capernaum. So, I mean, maybe he knew, maybe he was fluent in Greek. It's possible, but we can't know for sure. How about the books of James and Jude? These are said to have been written by Jesus's brothers. I think there's a chance that Jesus's brother James, who became the leader of the church in Jerusalem after Jesus rose from the dead and ascended, James became, rather than Peter, became the leader of the church. And I think the fact that he would have needed to have been literate and been able to speak several languages would have been important for him to lead a new international movement. I also think his theology sounds a little bit like what one might expect from a brand new Christian who was a very strict and devout Hebrew when it came to the law. For James, works and the law are very important, and he is working that out. Jude, I don't think there's any proof that was Jesus's brother, but by tradition, it says he was. So did Jesus and his disciples ever write anything? Well, yeah, Jesus wrote on the ground and Matthew filled out tax forms. But after that, it's a matter of opinion and scholarly debate, okay? Evidence that Jesus spoke Aramaic. I'm going to read these quickly. Just pay attention to the words in yellow. But I say to you, whoever is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment, and whoever says to his brother, Rakah, which is Aramaic for empty-headed, that's calling someone brainless, will be answerable to the Sanhedrin, and whoever says, you fool, that word means idiot, will be liable to fiery Gehenna. Gehenna is a Hebrew word, Gehenom, which means the valley of Hinnom. So he spoke Hebrew and Aramaic in that sentence, and Matthew let us know that he did. Interesting that he didn't translate either one of them, isn't it? Because sometimes they translate, you know. Mark 3:18, Andrew and Philip and Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, and James, son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus. And this is the list of disciples. And the last one listed is Simon the Cananeos. Now, sometimes that's translated Canaanite. Sometimes it's translated zealot, but in Hebrew, kanai means zealous. In Aramaic, ka'ana means the zealous. It doesn't have anything to do with him being a Canaanite or a zealot. It means that he's a zealous person. Like it said, zeal for my father's house will consume him. Jesus had zeal for the temple, for his father's house. This guy has zeal for his faith. Mark 5, Jesus said to the little dead 12-year-old girl, the daughter of Jairus, the ruler of the synagogue, Talitha cum, which means in Aramaic, little girl, get up. Now, I added the in Aramaic, okay? Mark didn't put, he just put what it meant. He didn't say which language it was, but he spelled it in Greek in such a way that we know that it was Aramaic. Mark 7, he said to the guy who couldn't hear, he said, Ephatha, and that means be opened. Well, what language does that word mean be opened in? Aramaic. Jesus is speaking Aramaic and people are speaking to him in Aramaic. Jesus spoke, what do you want me to do for you? And the blind man said to him, Rabboni, that can also be spelled with an O-U-N-I, Rabboni, that sort of means master teacher, more than just rabbi, which is Rabbi or Ravi, but Rabboni. Let me see. So that's Aramaic for master teacher. Mary at the tomb turned around and said to Jesus in Hebrew, and notice that it says in Hebrew in John's gospel, Rabboni, which means master, but it's actually an Aramaic word. However, in Hebrew, Rabboni is essentially identical. So it could either be confused or it really doesn't matter which language you say. But Aramaic is older than Hebrew, so it probably has Aramaic roots. He said Abba when he was praying. Notice it says Abba, Father. Did he say both of those words? Or is Mark giving us a translation of Abba? Abba is Aramaic for father, and Greek is pater. So it says Abba pater, which means father, father. So I think what we have here is Jesus said Abba. Mark is giving us the translation, Father, for you all things are possible. Remove this cup from me, yet not what I want, but what you want. And then the last one here on page 2, he brought Simon to Jesus, who looked at him and said, you are Simon, son of John, or Jonah, as it says in the Greek. You are to be called Cephas, which is translated Peter. And in Greek, Petros means rock. So Cephas is the Aramaic word for rock. He's speaking Aramaic to Simon. This one's interesting, and it's the last one on Aramaic. Notice how Mark, probably our oldest gospel, says that from the cross at 3 o'clock, Jesus cried out, and this is a quote of the first line of Psalm 22, that he said, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, which means in Aramaic, I added the in Aramaic, because Eloi is Aramaic. My God, why have you forsaken me? And then Matthew puts Eli, Eli, not Eloi. He puts Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. That's Hebrew. Look how close they are. And one uses Aramaic, one uses Hebrew. So which one did Jesus use? Well, it really doesn't matter. There may have been reasons why Matthew changed the Aramaic to Hebrew, given that he had more Hebrew-speaking people in his congregation or something. He was writing for he wrote his gospel for certain people in a certain area. He lived with certain people in a certain area, so he would have wanted them to understand what he was writing. And it might have been that the Hebrew would have been better for them for some reason, but it doesn't matter because it means the same thing. My God, why have you forsaken me? It's still Psalm 22. Interesting, we have both though, isn't it? All right, this is really easy. I can do it quickly. Notice in that first big paragraph that Jesus made a habit of coming back at the scribes and the Pharisees and saying, have you not read what David did? Have you not read in the law Have you not read over and over again? Have you not read in the scriptures? Have you not read what it was said to you by God? Notice Jesus is coming back at these very literate scholars with, you guys can't you read? This says he can. We already know he can because we know that he read in the synagogue at Nazareth, but I just wanted to point that out. In Luke 10, he says to the lawyer, what's written in the law? What do you read there? And Jesus affirms that he read it right. How can he do that if he didn't read? And then in the last one, he stood up and read in the synagogue, and he found the place where it was written, and he read, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me. He read from Isaiah. Evidence that he knew Greek. This is just a couple of little other reasons why he might know Greek. He had some conversations with people who were Greeks. What language was he speaking with when he spoke to the centurion in Capernaum? The centurion said to him, Lord, my servant's lying at home paralyzed in terrible distress. You think that centurion was speaking Aramaic or Hebrew? He's a Roman soldier. He's probably Italian. Is he going to be fluent? And then you've got the royal official in John 4. He works for Herod. The chances of him speaking Aramaic or Hebrew is pretty slim. Notice in John 7, Jesus says in the temple, I will be with you a little while longer, and then I am going to him who sent me. You will search for me, but you will not find me. And where I am, you cannot come. And the Judeans said to one another, where does this man intend to go that we will not find him? Does he intend to go to the dispersion among the Greeks and teach the Greeks? Well, how can he teach the Greeks if he doesn't know Greek? I think Jesus is speaking Greek to the centurion. I think he's speaking Greek to the royal official. I think everyone there knows he speaks Greek, and they say, well, maybe he's going to teach the Greeks. In John 12, he was at the festival and some Greeks came over and they wanted to see Jesus. So they heard Philip talking. Well, Philip's from Bethsaida and Philip's name is Greek. He's the only disciple with a Greek name. So he clearly will know Greek. And they're talking to him. He says, we want to see Jesus. We want to talk to Jesus. And Philip went and told Andrew, and Philip went and told Jesus. So what language is Jesus going to speak to these Greeks in? I mean, is somebody going to translate for him? It never says anything about anybody translating anything for Jesus in the New Testament. And then the last one, Pilate. What language are they talking together in? They have a long conversation in John. Pilate asks him, are you the king of the Judeans? Jesus answered, do you ask this on your own, or did others tell you this about me? Well, I'll tell you one thing, Pilate's not speaking Aramaic. He was only in the area for 10 years, and he avoided being around those people as much as he could. He spoke Greek, and he probably spoke Latin too, because most people who were officers and rulers in the Roman Empire spoke those two languages. Those were the languages of Rome, Latin and Greek. All right. So a couple of evidences that people were generally literate. Patricia's trying to get in. I just let you in, Patricia. Sorry, I've been busy. So it says in Luke 16, Jesus is telling a parable about a crooked manager who's very shrewd. And the crooked manager says, Jesus says, so summoning his master's debtors one by one, he asked the first, how much do you owe my master? And he answered, 100 jugs of olive oil. And he said to him, take your bill, sit down and change it, rewrite it, make it 50. He lowered what he owed, but he made them do it in their own handwriting. And then he asked another, how much do you owe? And he replied, 100 containers of wheat. And he said, take your bill, change it, make it 80. So Jesus, in this parable, he's telling to everyday average people who lived in Galilee, he's telling them a story about people sitting down and writing and changing their bills. Doesn't that assume that people can read and write? We're told by a lot of scholars, in the olden days that only 1% of the people could write. Clearly, that's wrong. In John's gospel, Pilate had an inscription written that he put on the cross. And it read, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. And it says many of the Judeans read this inscription because the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city. And it was written in Hebrew, in Latin, and in Greek. Wow, they really wanted to make sure that everybody understood what that said, didn't they? So who doesn't read Hebrew, Latin, or Greek in Jerusalem that day? When we know Jesus read Hebrew, we know he speaks fluently to Greek people. Does he speak Latin? Does he know any Latin? There are some Latin words in the New Testament, like forum, praetorium, denarius, and centurion. But I see no indication that Jesus spoke, wrote, or read Latin. And that's the end of my little slideshow. Hey, Patricia, welcome. Where are you at?
Hey, I'm at the office. I'm sorry I couldn't get away.
No problemo.
I'm sorry.
We're missing you,
It's been a really long, hard day,
I'm sure.
overwhelming. But I'm here. I'm here.
I'm sorry about that. Glad you're here.
Yeah. It's good
Okay,
to see everybody. Hey, y'all.
Hey, hi, Patricia.
Hey.
I'm new to the group here for today. I'm from upstate New York.
And-
Oh, welcome.
Yes,
is it-
thank
is
you. My name is Shar.
Shar.
It's nice to be, yes, Shar, C-H-A-R. It's short for Charlene.
Okay.
And you-
So,
you
yes,
see-
nice meeting you. I'm
You too.
enjoying this very
And
much.
Patricia, I don't know if you can see it or not, but two of your sisters are here.
Yeah, I see Renee and Debbie. Hey, y'all. Good to
And we
see y'all.
have Heather, and we also have Gloria.
Hey,
all right.
Gloria. Hey, Heather. And hey, Jean.
Hello.
Hi. And Sheila. DeToya. Good to see everybody.
Good to see you, sweetheart.
Yes.
It's like a homecoming, isn't it? It's just
Yes.
Yeah, I guess
have a little
so.
homecoming here. We got our little group going. So let's we've got plenty of time to talk for a few minutes. Patricia, you weren't here when I started, but we started out by asking basic questions like, do you think Jesus was literate? Could he read and write? And what language and things like that. And so we went through some slides trying to put together some facts about, why is the Bible in Greek, and how come these Hebrew people were speaking Aramaic? And I tried to make a complicated tale as simple as possible, and hope that I succeeded. I bet that some of that was new for you because it was new for me. I didn't realize how complicated it was, but I think I gave you the basics.
Yeah.
So how does that change your view of Jesus and the disciples, and what was going, and who he was and what was going on? I mean, what if he spoke Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek? Wow, he really trilingual? At least trilingual? I mean, have you thought of that before?
You know, I really never gave it a thought that he couldn't read or write or talk different languages. I guess I just accepted that he could. I mean, when you're reading the Bible and he's saying something, you're expecting him to be saying it in their language so that they can understand. So I guess I just never thought about it. I just accepted him for him, and he spoke everything.
That's what I do. Exactly. That he spoke
Yeah.
everything. He's Jesus. He speaks us. He's the Lord. He knows it all. He speaks everybody. Understands me. Understands you. He understands what language you're speaking. If you're Polish, Italian, German. It's just that's him. He knows.
Mhm.
We don't need to sit down and have a conversation with him, in his own language, because he is all languages.
The risen Lord doesn't have a language barrier.
Right.
Unfortunately, when Jesus was born, as an infant, he had to learn how to speak. And the question is, what languages did they teach him? And what did he learn? What languages did he learn to speak in his hometown and in his home region of Galilee? What languages did he learn so that he could function in his role as Messiah and Lord while he was while he had earthly limitations? And that he accepted, by the way, as the Apostle Paul wrote, he didn't consider equality with God something to be grasped, but emptied himself and became in human form and became a slave and obedient to death, even death on a cross. So he accepted that emptying, what we call kenosis. That's the Greek word for emptying. So as he became a baby, that means God accepted human limitations, which is a very humbling thing to do. If you think about God's character, it didn't used to be for me this, but when I think of God now, the first thing I think is humble. Because the act of creation, the act of redemption, and I think in the end, the act of consummation, all will be acts of humility. And this is the character of God, and it's the character of Christ, who is the image, the perfect image of God. So I say that only to point out that while Jesus was in his earthly ministry, there was no need for him to speak English or to know it. In fact, English hadn't been invented yet, so it didn't exist. But that doesn't mean he doesn't understand everything we say and know everything we know now, because he's the risen Lord, and those kinds of limitations would not be upon him as he's returned to his glory, his former glory with God. So anyway, that's my 2 cents worth on Jesus's humanity. So I'm suggesting to you that there's evidence that his everyday language was Aramaic, and he mostly taught in it. He sometimes used Hebrew when he was quoting the Old Testament. There were times when he would use Hebrew. How often, I don't know. He could read Hebrew. He did it more than once. And he talked about reading it all the time. And with his opponents, he said, "Can't you read? Didn't you read where it says?" How would he know what it says if he couldn't read it? And but also there is good evidence that he also spoke Greek. I still think the best evidence is that eloquent conversation that he had with Pilate and other people who wouldn't have known Aramaic or Hebrew from the man in the moon. Greek was the lingua franca by the time Jesus, it was the common language of the street by the time of Jesus's day. And thus the Gospels in the late 1st century were written in Greek, because that was the universal language, sort of like English is today. So that's my hypothesis anyway. Yes, Debbie? Debbie?
The Old Testament was in Hebrew and the New Testament was in Greek. Am I correct?
That's correct, except for the verses that I pointed out in the Old Testament. There are, what was it, 268 verses in the Old Testament are in Aramaic. But almost all of the Old Testament is in Hebrew, and almost all of the New Testament is in Greek, except where it gives you a few Aramaic and Latin words here and there.
Why do you think that amount was in Aramaic, just the 200 and whatever verses it was?
Those sections were written after the Babylonian captivity. And when they came back, they were speaking Aramaic.
Gotcha.
So they wrote those late sections of scripture in our Old Testament. Some of them were written in Aramaic. Now they were quickly translated into Hebrew, but our most ancient copies are Aramaic. Just those verses, though, just those portions.
Yeah.
And they were written after 539 when they came home, 539 BC.
Gotcha.
I'm
Go ahead,
sorry.
Debbie. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Gloria. Sorry.
That's Gloria. Hey.
Hi. Okay, to me, what has caught my interest, let me say, is that it really doesn't, it's not the fact that what he spoke. It is what was written. And then you have to keep in mind, he did not really write it. And you said yourself that we don't know who really wrote. Think about what you just said. That's what you have finished. So, is it really important as to what he was really, the language he was saying, he was speaking? Am I making sense?
Try it again, so I'm sure, okay, if you don't mind, please.
Okay, I said the thing of it is that he did not really write what we are reading today.
No,
He
he
did not
didn't.
really write. Everything was written after his death. So therefore, the importance of whether he could speak this language or that language, it is what was written.
Yes. So what we have is, I'm still not sure I'm hearing the question, but let me just say this for clarification. Okay. We're with a few exceptions, most scholars think that the Gospels were all written in Koine Greek originally. What we call the first autograph. Whoever wrote it put the stylus in the ink and wrote it on something, whether it was papyrus, which is made from reeds, or whether it was animal skins, whatever the first person, whoever that person was that wrote the very first one. We think they were written in Koine Greek. There are some scholars who think that maybe it's possible that Matthew and Luke were written in Hebrew first and then quickly translated into Greek, but that's a minority. But they wrote it in Greek, and they were writing it in Greek about a rabbi from Galilee that was in a region that was highly Hellenized and Greek speaking. But he makes it clear that this man was speaking in Aramaic because that was the language of home and villages of people who were of the Hebrew faith. They spoke Aramaic, and they got that Aramaic from being in captivity with the Assyrians and the Babylonians for many centuries. And so we know he could speak Hebrew because the ancient Hebrews wrote most of the Bible in Hebrew, and he read it. So all I'm saying is that you've got Greek writers writing in Greek about a Jewish Messiah, Hebrew Messiah, who who grew up learning Aramaic, who learned how to read Hebrew too, so that he could read the scriptures. And he learned Aramaic and Hebrew, but also in the street, he apparently learned Greek. It looks like there's good evidence that he also learned Greek because that was the language of the more general population. And as you know, Jesus didn't just stay in Galilee and visit Judea and Samaria. He also went to Tyre and Sidon and Caesarea Philippi, Caesarea Philippi, and the regions to the north, which were highly Gentile. And they didn't, you're not going to find anybody up there speaking Hebrew. They're probably going to be speaking mostly Greek speaking up that way too. So he probably spoke with them in Greek. Although many of them would have known Aramaic too, it just would have been a different dialect. So what's the question that we're getting at? Are you asking, does it matter what languages he spoke?
I think that's what I'm saying. I said it doesn't really matter what he spoke. It's what's written. And like you said, everything is written in Greek by other writers. That's what I was saying. It's a statement.
I guess I could agree with you on that. I mean, I don't know how the rest of you feel. I mean, for me, it's like, it doesn't matter nearly as much as what he said and what it meant. On the other hand, I can't help but be curious about Jesus, in the same way that I wonder about how old he was, or how tall he was, or, how short or long was his hair, or what kind of clothes did they wear, or what did Galilee look like back then? What did the temple in Jerusalem look back when he saw it? What did he see? This is historical curiosity more than it is about a matter of faith. So yeah, I'm with you on that, Gloria. If that's what you're saying, the faith issue is more important. This is a historical issue. You know, this is curiosity about what was life like for him and what languages did he speak. It's just sort of the furniture of his everyday life, trying to picture him and picture what he was like.
Okay, I can understand that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Sometimes too, Gloria, it gives us that final moment of focus that helps. You know, if Jesus were the American South in the 1960s, it might shape how we look and read and get impacted by him. If Jesus was from your islands, it might change how we look at him. If he was brought down in the middle of Europe in 1939,
I know
it's
you
going
want
to change how we look at him.
Hey, Gene, I think I picked up on most of what you said. Somebody has got your microphone on and I'm hearing conversation. So check your muting if there's conversation going on in your room. Yeah. Okay, so Dale has joined us. Welcome, Dale.
Hey,
Lord
Dale.
knows what background Dale will have for us this evening. Will it be Caesarea Maritima? Will it be
The backseat of his
Celts?
Camaro.
It could be a Camaro. It could be any. It's the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem. Ta-da! How you doing, Dale? Oh, he can't hear me because he's connecting to the audio. How you doing, Dale?
Good evening.
Good evening. Well,
Hey.
Hey,
it's good to see you. It's good to see you in Bethlehem.
I've been
oh,
playing-
little Dale of Bethlehem, how still we see thee lie.
Gene, will you finish your point that you were
Oh,
making?
let's say that Gene finished his point and move on.
Okay.
Well, I think what I heard you saying, if I'm not mistaken, is that if Jesus had been born in contemporary times, would it make a difference if he was from Birmingham, Alabama in 1960, or if he was from Boston in 1960?
Yeah.
It just gives us a little bit of final focus sometimes.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't want to derail the conversation either, but it had never occurred to me until tonight. I grew up holding a tape measure for a dad who built things and was a contractor. There's some of that going on, we think, right? Dad Joseph. Well, what about the Egyptian influence? We don't know how long he was there. And none of that comes out in any of the language and stuff, but it would inform who he was and would be another language to his repertoire.
Yeah. Okay. Let me affirm that. First of all, we think, based on the dates that I've guessed, around 8 or 7 BC being the date of his birth, and we know that Herod died in 4 BC. That's one of the firmest dates in antiquity from that time period. So Jesus would have been, 3 or 4 when they were making a decision to come back and where to move. Are we going to go back home to Bethlehem? Well, Joseph was warned, no, you can't go there. Archelaus is ruling there, Herod's son, and Herod Archelaus is worse than his dad. And so Joseph says, well, we'll just move to Nazareth. We were visiting up there. We liked the place. They've been up there twice. So they moved to Nazareth, and Jesus, by the time they got there, was between 4 and 6. So we know he was a young fella. So that means that, but remember this too, if Jesus was born in Bethlehem, which the scriptures say he was born a Judean, not a Galilean. That means that his mom and dad would have had a Judean dialect of Aramaic, not Galilean. Okay, so Jesus, it would be like if my family with heavy Southern accents, had moved to Chicago. Boy, would we stand out, right? So Mary and Joseph moving from Bethlehem to Nazareth, that's quite a big difference in dialect. And my friend Butch, who just visited last week, he has a heavy Southern accent because he's from McGee, Mississippi, but his sons sound like they're from New England. They spent most of their growing up years on the coast of Maine.
Mhm.
So maybe Jesus developed his Galilean accent simply because he was around Galileans all the time in Nazareth and wherever else he went. Remember, they picked out Peter's accent when he was at the charcoal fire at Caiaphas's house. They said, "Aren't you one of Jesus's followers?" And Peter said, "Oh, no, you're crazy. I don't even know the man." And the woman said, "Yeah, but I just heard you talking and you sound like a Galilean and your accent gives you away.
Ain't from around here.
You're not from around here."
That's
He said,
interesting.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So there was definitely a Galilean dialect, and there was definitely a Judean dialect, and you know, it doesn't make any difference so much in terms of faith, but it does give us those details that make picturing this history a little clearer for me.
I think, Bert, as you talk about that, I don't know. I never thought about it that Jesus spoke varying languages. I do know that people who have accents, though, if they're in another country, you don't know you have an accent. People
Yeah.
would say to me all the time, "I hear an accent. Where are you from?" I'm like, "You hear an accent? Really?" Because I don't hear one. I don't think I have. I know I have an accent because of, where my place of origin, where I was born and grew up. But there are times when some people ask me, "Are you British?" I'm trying to figure out the accent. Where are you from? So I get that question from time to time. But I'm thinking, I don't think Jesus knew that he had an accent if he had one. I never thought about him knowing these languages, but even to go back to your original question, I do believe that he was smart. He had to have been, when I think about him being in confounding the doctors and the lawyers as a boy in the temple. He could have been a genius. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it
Well,
never occurred to me about the languages piece until you mentioned that. So
yeah,
I'm
well,
sitting with that.
let me add another piece to that too, Patricia, because I've done a lot of teaching over in Palestine and Jordan and Israel, and I don't think that the bus drivers and the restaurant owners and the shopkeepers over there are necessarily geniuses, but they live in a place that's different than America. We only need one language to get by here for the most part. But that's not true in Israel, where you have Arabic, English, Hebrew, and then a few others. So what you find out is that your bus driver may speak fluent Hebrew, fluent Arabic, pretty good English, and then not too bad in Korean and Russian, depending on, what kind of groups he is driven for in the past. So they're in a multilingual culture. And for the most part, the US hasn't been a multilingual culture. We're more multilingual now than we've ever been because of Spanish. We have many more. I think now that Hispanic people are the number one minority in America, if I'm not mistaken now. They have the most numbers. They have more numbers than African Americans. Am I wrong? That's what I read. So it's still predominantly in our country, we speak English, and they don't even push language very much in the public schools, and they never have. They don't push learning new languages, but you have to take English in other countries. It's required, and on top of that, here you have these Muslim and Christian Palestinians who can speak Hebrew pretty well to fluently because they live with them every day.
Yeah. What was you going to say about up north? I forgot now. And my mind is going. Sit. All of a sudden, I had something I wanted, but all of a sudden, I think the heat's got to my brain.
Shar, it'll come back to you, Shar. Let me share something with you about my dad.
Okay.
My dad wanted to be a pastor, and nobody in his family had ever, gone to college. Some of them hadn't finished high school. And my uncle spoke something like this. Well, hey, Bird, I don't know. I ain't sure what we're doing tomorrow, but if you want to come over, we might could use your help. And they talked like that. That made my dad ashamed. And he knew that if he didn't stop talking like that, he would never be able to succeed as a pastor in the larger pulpits in places like Atlanta, which was his goal. He wanted. Yeah, so he went off at the age of 17 to Young Harris College and promptly majored in English. He worked like a slave to lose his bad grammar and his Southern accent. And to a great degree, he succeeded with enormous effort. So there you go. I mean, we're talking about that's how important language was to him. And just kind of underlining how important language is in general in understanding a culture or a person or a time frame. And obviously we have a multicultural, complex, religio-socio-economic setting for Jesus. It was not simple.
Right, exactly. Thank you, Pastor.
And I think you made a good point there, Bert, because I think that's what happens with interpretation. The language that it was written in meaning one thing, and we interpret it as something else. Because there are times when, I mean, just in our normal day conversations, I've learned to speak a certain way. I mean, sometimes, you would tell me, Patricia, I can't understand anything you're saying. Have you been speaking to your family? And I'm like, why?
Wait a minute, explain that,
right?
So the reason is because when she speaks with her family, she automatically flips a switch.
Easily.
Takes on the accent.
Yep.
Yeah.
I go back to what I am familiar with.
And then she forgets to flip that switch and she talks to me and I'm like, huh?
Right, excuse me. I understand.
What are you saying? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm down here. I automatically, well, I've been from the country before anyway, but I automatically pick up that Southern accent.
Yeah.
And I don't come down here that often, but I used to go to South Carolina every year, and that's where my parents were when they retired. So to me, it's when I come down here, all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's just like going to Old Home Week. I pick it right up. I understand, and I speak the same language as everybody else down here.
Yeah, I can hear you. I heard you do it a minute ago. Do it again. Give me some Southern.
How y'all doing today? You know what? I don't know, but we all got to think about something to eat. That's right.
That's pretty good.
I come down here and I tell the people up north, I said, they don't serve their food in dishes. They serve them all in platters. I says, I get this food sitting in front of me. I got enough for 2 meals.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Right, and that is the truth.
Yeah, it's worse. It's worse than that in Palestine. More, man, they just pile it on. You cannot believe.
Pile it on, right?
Well, they don't bring you one platter. They bring a platter out that's as big as a coffee table. I mean, it's like,
my goodness.
And then they put it down and they eat on the floor sometimes in their homes and
right.
And exactly. People recline on pillows and then you've got this huge platter and somebody's always coming by and putting more on your plate.
Oh, goodness.
So I had to find out what the Arabic words were for I'm full and please stop. You know, I had to learn how to do it politely.
You had to do that politely, correct.
So they told me to say ana mabsut. And I'm like, that means I'm happy. And and they said, yeah, that's what you say. I'm happy. That means you don't need any more.
You don't need any more. I'm happy.
I'm happy. I don't need a thing. What did she say?
She's just being crazy Sheila today.
It sounded like you said you were out of your soup.
I know. It's ana mabsut. I think that's how you say it. That's my
He's
best.
in a mob suit.
But
Yeah,
gee,
on a
That's
mob
funny.
suit.
That's really funny.
In a mob suit.
I've got tears running down my
He
face.
suits
now,
Sheila,
I'm
then you're
telling you.
crazy.
Oh.
If he's
Right,
out of his
Sheila?
suit, he's crazy.
Sheila,
Oh, well, what can I say, you know?
You know?
Sheila,
Oh, we've got a comment
Yes.
from Gerald. We've got a comment from Gerald Howard. Do you mind if I interrupt?
I'll go right
Go for
ahead.
Gerald Howard wrote, Jesus was God. If he doesn't understand all languages, he would not even understand all prayers around the world. This is crazy.
Mhm.
That's true.
Mm.
Yeah, I
Yes.
think we addressed that earlier, but would someone else like to tackle that?
difference between Jesus of history and Christ of eternity.
Yeah, this is the difference between Jesus of history and Christ of eternity. That's the
Amen.
difference,
Okay.
Gerald.
Amen.
And we were talking about that with Shar just a minute ago. The
Mhm.
difference between the Lord of eternity, who knows all things and for whom there is no language barrier with anyone, but for a short time, Lord of eternity accepted an emptying, humbly accepted an emptying in order to be human. And
Yeah.
otherwise, when Jesus was born, he would have been born learning, knowing all languages from the beginning of time to the end of time, including Southern English, which obviously he was unable to do in the manger.
May still struggle with that.
What?
They still
He
struggle.
may
with
still
that.
struggle with that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, I have to go back up north tomorrow. I extended my vacation a couple extra days, but now I'm planning on trying to come back in the spring when it's not 100 degrees outside.
Yeah.
I'm not,
Yeah.
my body's not used to this yet. It's still in winter mode,
Yeah.
but.
Well, I appreciate,
So
I
what was you
appreciate
gonna say,
everybody
Jean?
being, I'm sorry, who did I interrupt?
Nobody.
Thought I did.
You
Anybody-
just interrupted me, so I just
I
said
said
nobody.
nobody.
Anybody else got anything to say before we close?
Jean?
I'm telling you, watch out.
Dale.
Dale is in lunar orbit.
I see that.
Lunar, or I like that.
That's the strawberry full moon from last night.
Yeah, you took that picture, didn't you?
Oh, wow.
That's awesome.
Amazing.
Got a good camera.
Yeah.
He's got
I
one of
got a
those.
good one too.
I want to thank y'all for letting me join your group today.
Yeah, Char,
You're
thank you for
welcome.
being here, and thank you, Gloria, Debbie, Renee, Heather.
It's nice
Thank
meeting-
you all, Dean.
It was nice meeting
Dale,
y'all.
thank you, everybody. And Patricia, especially you. I'm sorry you've had a tough day.
Yeah. I'm gonna be here a little while longer, but I'll text you when I'm on my way.
Okay, thank you. God
Mhm.
bless every one of you.
Good to
and
see
thank-
everybody.
Bye.
Y'all take
Awesome.
care.
Bye.
See y'all.
Bye.
See y'all.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Yeah,
See y'all
bye-bye.
later, all right?
Yeah, see y'all
Bye.
later.
All right. Bye-bye. Debbie, I'll be in touch.